everyone, my name is Caitlin Hovenicht. Relaying back to modern times right now, I kind of think about where we're at, what's going on, what are our coping mechanisms, and one of our coping mechanisms that we use to this day and that we've probably always used is going to be marijuana or THC or CBD essentially. Anyways, aside from coping with the drug itself, I wanted to go ahead and discuss some of the factors that we look at when we're putting it into our bodies. I want to start off by saying that in no way would I ever shame anybody for using THC or anything along the route of it being medically ingested, or if you just want to ingest it on your own, what you do is not my problem. But it's essentially something that I've been thinking about a lot that I want to kind of put forth into information. A lot of the people that we focus on these days, or a lot of marketing things that we see, are all about healthy living, non-GMO, pesticide-free, right? We relay that back to vegetables, fruits, and what we're consuming at grocery stores, correct? But do we ever think about what we're consuming at pot shops? Or, alcohol for the fact, but we're not going into that today. We're going to be focusing today on marijuana. And when we speak about marijuana, we speak about kind of, oh, it's amazing, it's uplifting, it's medically good, it's therapeutically good for you. But is it actually good for you to ingest in a smoking matter on your lungs? When it comes to distributing marijuana, as it's becoming more and more popular legally, we look at more and more places growing marijuana. We look at more farms spraying pesticides on marijuana. And we see a lot of marijuana packages that say pesticide-free, but then we also see a lot of marijuana packages that don't say that. And then we're also looking at what's going into that weed. So a lot of our marijuana that we have is genetically modified, and by genetically modified, it means that we can kind of mess with the THC balance that we're putting in there, or the percentage that we're putting in there. A lot of people, when they see GMO or non-GMO, they're going to jump for the item, they're going to grab it, right? Because you see it at the grocery store and you're like, I want that, it's non-GMO. But do we think the same way about the marijuana that we're putting into our bodies? Or do we just kind of let that fly? It kind of seems like these days we think we're letting it fly, right? So we're laying back to maybe cognitive effects of marijuana and what you're smoking. We're not smoking what our grandparents used to smoke, right? No, we're smoking some very intense THC, CBD marijuana. A study done by Harvard based on cognitive effects, we look at 3-year-olds and 45-year-olds, and we look at it medically. We see a 3-year-old that maybe had ingested THC drops or CBD drops because that 3-year-old is fighting seizures or fighting pain. That kid can't sleep at night. Mom and dad get the medical approval from their naturopath or even their doctor. They say, go ahead, here's this, we can just prescribe you that, right? That 3-year-old is gonna have such a hard time learning in the future regarding brain function and marijuana because we're putting a substance, a drug into our bodies at such a young age. But the 45-year-old, we see that the brain is fully developed and we don't see much of a problem with the 45-year-old, right? And so we have to think about the percentage that's going into this, the modifications that are going into this, and how it's going to affect us in the future, right? In that Harvard study, the cognitive effects, we also see that psychologically, 18-year-olds are getting induced for schizophrenia a lot more, and we think about how much did they smoke or what did they focus on when they were younger. We see a lot of THC pop up in that, right? On that study done by Harvard EDU. But when it comes to maybe therapeutic uses, we think back on the date, right? A article done by the American Psychology Association states that we've been using marijuana for millenniums. Since BC, right? Because it's just been a drug that's been growing and growing. So we look back on history, we see that people have written in there, oh, I've smoked this, I feel so much better. But it's not what we're smoking today. It is not. What we're smoking today is heavily processed marijuana. In fact, I have an example here. You can see on this bag, you get a total of 25.9% THC, regarding maybe the 11% that our grandparents used to smoke. And then on this bag, it states, warning, this product can implicate driving. It is illegal to drive underneath the influence. While we look here, and we have, it's called Kush creams. And this is a cream that you go ahead and put on your body, but it's CBD. So CBD has a lot of less affecting properties than THC. While THC makes you feel strung out and high, we have CBD that's going to make you feel relaxed and calm. So relaying back to the effects of marijuana on the body, should we be smoking it or ingesting it, or should this only be a salve that we're using on our bodies? Should this only be something that we are using externally, not internally? marijuana has progressed so much more than it should be at the moment. I don't think our ancestors ever saw us doing what the kiddos call dabs or wax. And wax is going to be marijuana that is heated and pressed down to a fine oil to the point where you can extract all THC, almost 98% of it, and just a little drop of that on a rig, as they call it, that's heated up with a torch can get you beyond stoned for hours, and it's the quicker way. But you think about that hot wax that's going into your body and that's coating your lungs, that's still so new. We did not see that. So we have to think about how it's going to affect us in the future, and we need to look into these researches a little bit deeper and maybe think, oh, I should not be smoking 8 times a day. I should maybe smoke 8 times a week, or maybe 3 times a week. A lot of people also use it as coping mechanisms, but do we need to cope with marijuana, or do we need to learn how to cope on our own mentally? These are a lot of questions that are coming about in the future, and a lot of questions that are just being developed by research right now. And it's interesting to see where we're going to get in the future. Maybe we'll see some regulation with THC, but for now, I believe it should be strictly checked in distributing factors. I think it should be regulated. I think THC percentage should be regulated as well. We should not be doing anything above maybe 32%, considering the fact that our brains are having a tough time cognitively functioning. That is pretty much how I would like to end this out, but it is a question to keep in mind as we move on in the future and we see how substances develop.